In this Baldur's Gate 3 Warlock Class guide, I'm going to be covering the Warlock Class, including all 3 subclasses, and providing you some useful information and tips. I'll be doing more build guides for Baldur's Gate 3, including Warlock, but for now, let's look at how the Warlock functions and its basics. Warlocks in Baldur's Gate 3 are a very unique class that operates somewhat like a spellcaster and somewhat like a martial character. They can learn up to level 5 spells, but their claim to fame is their cantrip Eldritch Blast that shoots a beam of force damage from very long distances and can be upgraded to knock enemies backward. They also have very high charisma, making them great at handling dialogue. Warlocks make a pact with a powerful being in order to obtain their magic, and this grants them Pact magic spell slots that operate a bit differently than all other spellcasters in Baldur's Gate 3. They gain far fewer spell slots than other spellcasters, but they can replenish them on short rest, which no other caster can. Unlike sorcerers or wizards, warlocks can actually melee rather effectively thanks to their Pact of the Blade feature, which not only allows their chosen pact weapon to roll using charisma instead of strength or dexterity, but at level 5 they also gain an extra attack each turn like most other martial classes when using said weapon. This allows them to play effectively in melee or at range while still having potent spellcasting. First, we'll take a look at how to set up your warlock during character creation for best results. We'll begin with abilities first, since this is arguably the most important part aside from choosing your subclass. Your primary abilities as a warlock are charisma and constitution, but you may also want some dexterity for improved initiative and armor class. Charisma will affect how difficult it is for enemies to save against your spells, it will improve your dialogue skill checks, and it will also increase the likelihood of your Eldritch Blast hitting your target, and if you took Pact of the Blade, it will also affect how likely your melee attacks are to hit with your Pact weapon, as well as how much damage they deal. Constitution is there to help keep you alive via HP and also to help you maintain concentration on spells like Witch Bolt, Cloud of Daggers, or Darkness. For this reason, I strongly recommend that you invest 16 in Charisma during character creation and probably 16 in Constitution. You can set Dexterity at 14 to gain some extra armor class and initiative, especially if you end up taking medium armor proficiency later on from a feat or multiclass, or you got it from your race. Note that I've changed this from the recommendations as it's more optimized for your character during the early goings of the game. When it comes to race, the first one I recommend is Githyanki, since this provides the Warlock with medium armor proficiency as well as astral knowledge, allowing them to gain proficiency in one ability each long rest. They will also gain Misty Step at level 5, which can help with Warlock positioning. Half-Elf is also a great choice for shield proficiency, as well as Fey Ancestry, which provides advantage on saving throws against Charmed and Sleep immunity. They also gain Dark Vision, but this is less useful to Warlocks, who can gain this via the Devil's Sight Eldritch Invocation. Humans are also a good choice for the same shield proficiency as Half-Elf, but they also exchange Fey Ancestry for one skill. If you want more skills on your Warlock, then this may be a better choice than Half-Elf. And Half-Orc is also not bad for Dark Vision, Relentless Endurance, and higher melee critical damage than other races, especially if you plan to play a melee-focused Warlock. For skills, you'll minimally want proficiency in Intimidation and Deception, since you should be handling the dialogue in your group if playing a Warlock, unless you bring Will along. You can use your background to take Guild Artisan, which will give you Persuasion and Insight, and then use 1 point to select Intimidation and the other to select Deception. At level 1, Warlocks will gain access to Eldritch Blast, which is a unique cantrip that deals 1 to 10 force damage to an enemy from incredible range. Cantrips are effectively level 0 spells that can be cast each turn. Eldritch Blast targets the armor of the enemy and works much like any other ranged attack, except that it uses the Charisma modifier of the Warlock for its attack roll. This means it is more accurate from elevation, has disadvantage when used in melee range of an enemy, and gains advantage when used when hidden from enemies, just like ranged attacks. Eldritch Blast can be upgraded at later levels to deal more damage and to knock back enemies struck by it, and will gain additional beams that increase with your character level. This is an important distinction from class level because this means multiclassing will not reduce the effectiveness of Eldritch Blast. Warlocks also gain their first Pact magic spell slot at level 1. Pact magic spell slots function differently from all their spell slots in the game, and they are a different color to reflect this. Pact magic spell slots replenish after each short rest, instead of long rests like normal spell slots, allowing them to be used more frequently before needing to long rest. Additionally, each spell cast with a Pact magic spell slot is always cast at the highest level of spell known by the Warlock. Many lower level spells in BG3 can be upcast using higher level spell slots to greater effect, and Warlocks automatically upcast every spell they know if it can be because of their Pact magic spell slots. Warlocks gain far fewer spells than the typical caster, however, and they know far fewer spells as well, though they don't need to prepare their spells ahead of time and can cast any spell they know as long as they have one spell slot available. At level 2, the Warlock will get to pick 2 Eldritch Invocations from a list, and these will all have different effects. More Eldritch Invocations will unlock as the Warlock levels up, and they will get to choose a total of 6 Eldritch Invocations in BG3, giving them a lot of flexibility and making each Warlock a bit different depending on what they choose. I highly recommend at this level you select Agonizing Blast to add your Charisma modifier to Eldritch Blast's damage, making it on par with a weapon attack. Fiendish Vigor is also good since it provides you some extra HP before each fight without using a spell slot, and it's much better early on in the game than later, otherwise I'd recommend Repelling Blast. Warlocks also gain a second Pact Magic spell slot at this level, allowing them to cast 2 spells before each short rest, and this is the last Pact Magic spell slot they will gain until level 11. At level 3, Warlocks gain one of 3 Pact boons: Pact of the Chain, Pact of the Blade, or Pact of the Tome. Familiars are nice for another body on the battlefield, and imps can fly and become invisible, making them great scouts, being able to reach places unseen. Being able to use your Charisma to melee gives the Warlock the ability to melee effectively even with low strength and dexterity. It also allows them to focus solely on Charisma and Constitution, allowing them to push these ability scores high with little divergence. Being able to use Guidance is great, but only if no one else in your party can cast it. Vicious Mockery is a good pickup, as it allows you to prevent dangerous enemies from hitting your tanks when needed, and Thorn Whip allows you to pull enemies to their deaths, though this won't be all that often. Warlock spell slots also increase to level 2 at this level, allowing you to select level 2 spells, and also upcasting any level 1 spell using your spell slots if it can be. At Warlock level 4, you'll get to select 1 feat from the feat list. Ability Improvement is not a bad choice here to get your Charisma to 18, since this affects your Dialogue, Eldritch Blast, melee attacks if you chose Pact of the Blade, and the difficulty class of your spells. Alert is also a good choice since it allows you to take your turn earlier in combat, which can help you get off spells like Hypnotic Pattern before enemies take their turn, making some combats much less difficult. At Warlock level 5, Warlocks will deepen their pact with their patron, allowing them some new capabilities depending on which pact they chose at level 3. If they chose Pact of the Chain, their familiar will gain an extra attack every turn. If they chose Pact of the Blade, they'll gain an extra attack every turn if they use their Pact weapon to attack. And if they chose Pact of the Tome, they'll be able to cast Call Lightning, Animate Dead, and Haste once per long rest each. Warlocks will also get to choose a third Eldritch Invocation at this level, including 2 new ones that let you learn Slow or Bestow Curse. Here I recommend selecting Repelling Blast, which can make your Eldritch Blast knock enemies backwards. Knocking enemies backwards in BG3 can often kill enemies in one shot depending on where they are positioned, so it's more significant than it appears. Warlock spell slots also increase to level 3 spell slots at this level, and they gain access to level 3 spells. And lastly, Eldritch Blast will gain a second beam at this level, allowing them to target the same target a second time, or to target a second target if they prefer. These things all added together make level 5 a very important level for Warlocks. At Warlock level 6, each Warlock will gain a subclass feature that changes depending on which subclass was chosen, and we'll cover this in the Warlock Subclasses section. At level 7, Warlocks will get to choose a 4th Eldritch Invocation, including 3 new ones that let you learn Ray of Sickness, Chromatic Orb, and Silence once per rest each, or let you cast Confusion, or let you cast Polymorph. I recommend selecting Mire of the Mind here because Slow can really mess with a group of enemies, turning the tides of battle. Warlock spell slots also increase to level 4 spell slots at this level, and they gain access to level 4 spells. At Warlock level 8, you'll get to select 1 feat from the feat list. Ability Improvement is not a bad choice here to get your Charisma to 20, since this affects your Dialogue, Eldritch Blast, melee attacks if you chose Pact of the Blade, and the difficulty class of your spells. Again, Alert is also a good choice since it allows you to take your turn earlier in combat, which can help you get off spells like Hypnotic Pattern before enemies take their turn, making some combats less difficult. Or Resilient Constitution for improved concentration checks. At level 9, the Warlock spell slots reach their max level of 5, and they will not increase from this point onward. Warlocks also gain their 5th Eldritch Invocation at this level, including 3 new ones that let you cast Minions of Chaos, Enhanced Leap, or Speak with the Dead. Minions of Chaos is a good choice if you want a strong summons, but Enhanced Leap lets you cast this as a ritual spell, meaning you never use a spell slot to use it out of combat, and it can just make exploration way easier without having to worry about spell slots. At Warlock level 10, Eldritch Blast gains a 3rd and final beam, allowing you to target the same enemy 3 times or 3 separate enemies in the same turn. Note that this is tied to your character level, so this could be a lower Warlock level if you multiclassed. And also at this level, Warlocks will once again gain a subclass feature that changes depending on your subclass, which we will cover in the Warlock Subclasses section. At Warlock level 11, Warlocks gain access to their 3rd and final spell slot. They also gain access to some level 6 spells, and they can choose one that they can cast once per long rest without consuming a spell slot. This drastically increases the firepower of the Warlock because they can still use their other 3 spell slots for other spells. At level 12, Warlocks gain their 6th and final Eldritch Invocation, including 1 new one that lets you further increase your melee damage by your Charisma modifier, which is likely a good choice if you chose Pact of the Blade and you're going the melee route. Otherwise, I'd select the Elemental or Enhanced Leap, whichever you didn't select before. Warlocks also gain their third feat at this level from the feat list. If you're not at 20 Charisma, you should take it to 20 now, and if you are, select one of the other 2 feats suggested. Equipment-wise, you'll either want light or medium armor for your Warlock, depending on what proficiencies you have from your race. Focus on gaining the highest armor class you can with it, as this will help keep you alive. It's unlikely you'll have more than 14 dexterity as a Warlock, so medium armor is a better option if you can use it when compared to light armor. For weapon, you'll likely be using a Pact weapon if you play any sort of melee Warlock, so equipping weapon is not particularly necessary for a Warlock. However, it may be wise to equip a shield if you have proficiency with shields, since this will further boost your armor class, even if you're playing at range. If you're not using a Pact weapon, then your weapon choice isn't super important, since you will likely use Eldritch Blast each turn or cast a spell. Look for weapons that give you some sort of passive effect. Moving along to the subclasses, your choice of Warlock subclass comes down to a few factors. What type of patron do you wish to have? What spells do you want to gain access to? And what subclass features do you gain? Let's have a look at these things before I wrap up this guide with some multiclassing tips. Warlocks will choose a patron at level 1, which will determine their subclass, and these are the Fiend, the Archfey, and the Great Old One. Fiends are evil creatures from the lower planes of existence, such as archdevils and demogorgons, and want nothing more than to watch the world burn. Archfey are creatures of legend that possess secrets long forgotten by mortals, and the Great Old Ones are mysterious patrons from far-off planes of existence, such as an elder god that may have motives inconceivable to regular folk. All Warlocks gain an initial subclass feature at level 1 unique to their subclass, and they will also gain one more at level 6 and another at level 10. Additionally, each Warlock will gain access to 2 spells based on the patron they've chosen at each odd level through 9. This means at levels 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Warlocks don't automatically learn these spells, but instead can choose to learn them if they wish as they level up. The Fiend has mostly fire-oriented spells, while the Archfey and Great Old One have a lot of control spells that allow them to manipulate others both inside and outside of combat. At level 1, the Fiend Warlocks gain temporary health when they drop an enemy to 0 HP, equal to their Warlock level plus their Charisma modifier. This is a phenomenal bonus that can help offset some of the Warlock's lower HP compared to other martial classes, particularly when using Pact of the Blade. However, note that the temporary HP from it will not stack with Armor of Agathis, which most melee Warlocks will use, so it lends itself better to a ranged Warlock unless you don't use this spell. At level 1, Fiend Warlocks also gain access to Burning Hands and the Command spell, though they needn't select them if they don't want. Burning Hands is a good short-range Kono AoE, and Command is a great way to get the Flaming Sword at the beginning of the game if you want it. Both of these spells can be upcast for greater effect, so they will only get stronger as your Warlock gains levels. At level 3, Fiend Warlocks gain access to Scorching Ray and Blindness. Scorching Ray does excellent damage and works similarly to Eldritch Blast, and so targets the armor class of the enemy. Blindness is phenomenal because it makes the target attack with disadvantage, meaning it rolls 2 dice using the lower of 2 values, and your party gains advantage against it, meaning you roll 2 dice and use the higher of 2 values. This effect lasts 10 turns and doesn't require concentration. Both of these spells can be upcast for greater effect, so they will only get stronger as your Warlock gains levels. At level 5, Fiend Warlocks gain access to Fireball and Stinking Cloud. Fireball is a deadly AoE that can wipe out large packs of enemies or severely weaken them, and Stinking Cloud is a rather large AoE that prevents anyone standing in it from taking actions. Only Fireball can be upcast for more damage, and Stinking Cloud does not get stronger as you level. At level 6, Fiend Warlocks can use their patron to provide them an extra 1 to 10 roll on an ability check once per short rest. This is a toggleable feature under their passives tab. At level 7, Fiend Warlocks gain access to Fire Shield and Wall of Fire. Fire Shield gives you resistance to fire or cold damage and lets you retaliate with the opposite type of damage if struck with a melee attack, and lasts 10 turns with no concentration needed. Wall of Fire, on the other hand, lets you create a huge wall of fire that damages anyone caught in it but requires concentration to maintain. At level 9, Fiend Warlocks gain Flame Strike and Cone of Cold. Flame Strike is a ranged AoE that does both fire and radiant damage, and Cone of Cold is a Kono AoE that does cold damage. And finally, at level 10, Fiend Warlocks gain Fiendish Resilience, allowing them to select a damage type to gain resistance to until their next short rest, at which time they can select the same or a different type of resistance. Up next, we have the Archfey. At level 1, Archfey Warlocks can charm or frighten enemies around them for 2 turns once every short rest. This is useful if surrounded, for instance if you're using Pact with a Blade, but not generally if you're playing a ranged Warlock. Also at level 1, Archfey Warlocks gain access to Fairy Fire and Sleep. Fairy Fire makes all attacks against affected enemies have advantage as long as you maintain concentration, which is almost like a better version of Bless, except it can be saved against. Sleep puts enemies to sleep, but can only do so if the total health of the targets is less than the number shown on the spell. Sleep can be used more easily as the Warlock levels up since the amount of HP increases with the level of the spell slot. At level 3, Archfey Warlocks gain access to Calm Emotions and Phantasmal Force. Calm Emotions prevents humanoids in the area from being charmed or frightened, but requires concentration to maintain. Phantasmal Force deals damage each turn to one enemy as long as you maintain concentration. At level 5, Archfey Warlocks gain access to Blink and Plant Growth. Blink allows you to phase out if you pass a dice roll, preventing you from being targeted or damaged for one turn. Plant Growth hampers movement in a large AoE, but doesn't prevent line of sight, so it's best suited for preventing melee units from reaching you. At level 6, Archfey Warlocks gain the ability to turn invisible when struck in combat once per short rest. They can then use Misty Step on the following turn if they wish, though it will break invisibility to do so. The problem with this reaction is that sometimes enemies attack in groups and you will turn invisible to only be hit by the very next attack anyway, breaking your invisibility. I highly suggest you take Resilient Constitution as a feat if selecting the subclass, since this can help you pass the concentration check that occurs when you're attacked while invisible. At level 7, Archfey Warlocks gain access to Dominate Beast and Greater Invisibility. Dominate Beast will allow you to gain control of a beast who will fight alongside you, but requires concentration to maintain. Greater Invisibility allows you to make a target invisible as long as you maintain concentration, and anytime the target performs an action or interacts with an item, you will make a stealth check to remain invisible or not, with progressively harder checks. This is great for rogues or anyone that has high stealth. At level 9, Archfey Warlocks gain access to Dominate Person and Seeming. Dominate Person works like Dominate Beast, but works on humanoids. Seeming allows you to disguise up to 4 members of your party at once, allowing you to blend in places you shouldn't be able to. At level 10, Archfey Warlocks cannot be charmed passively. This means Half-Elf or Elf is not a good choice if you plan to take 10 levels of Archfey Warlock, since you already have advantage on saving throws against this effect, nearly nullifying it anyway. Up next is the Great Old One. At level 1, Great Old One Warlocks can passively frighten an enemy and all nearby enemies if they strike it with a critical hit. Also at level 1, Great Old One Warlocks gain access to Tasha's Hideous Laughter and Dissonant Whisperous. Tasha's Hideous Laughter makes a creature prone that can't get up as long as you maintain concentration, though it can try to get up when taking damage. And Dissonant Whisperous deals damage to and frightens an enemy at range. Dissonant Whisperous will gain more damage as your spell slots increase in level. At level 3, Great Old One Warlocks gain access to Detect Thoughts and Phantasmal Force. Detect Thoughts is fantastic in dialogues for gaining the outcomes you want, and Phantasmal Force deals damage each turn to one enemy as long as you maintain concentration. At level 5, Great Old One Warlocks gain access to Bestow Curse and Slow. These can also be obtained by choosing them via Eldritch Invocations, but Great Old One Warlocks can select them as spells instead when they level up. Bestow Curse allows you to afflict an enemy with a variety of curses from very close range, and Slow allows you to slow down up to 6 enemies, reducing their movement speed, lowering their armor, and reducing their capabilities for as long as you maintain concentration. At level 6, Great Old One Warlocks gain a reaction that allows them to impose disadvantage on an attack roll against them, and if it misses, gain advantage against the target for one turn. This can be used once per short rest. At level 7, Great Old One Warlocks gain access to Dominate Beast and Avard's Black Tentacles. Dominate Beast will allow you to gain control of a beast who will fight alongside you, but requires concentration to maintain. Avard's Black Tentacles creates a large AoE of tentacles that remove movement and deal damage to creatures within. Attack rolls made to creatures smothered by the tentacles have advantage. At level 9, Great Old One Warlocks gain access to Dominate Person and Telekinesis. Dominate Person works like Dominate Beast, but works on humanoids. Telekinesis allows you to move a person or object a certain distance, like off a cliff or into a deadly AoE, and allows you to recast it without consuming an additional spell slot as long as you maintain concentration on it. At level 10, Great Old One Warlocks gain resistance to psychic damage, and when they take psychic damage, the attacker also takes the same amount of damage. In this section, we'll take a look at multiclassing a Warlock in BG3 and what other classes you might multiclass with. Keep in mind this is not a complete list, but rather helpful suggestions that make good pairings. Paladins, Sorcerers, and Bards all use Charisma to cast their spells, so they make solid choices for pairing with a Warlock. Warlock level 2 is not a bad time to multiclass a Warlock since they will bring with them Eldritch Blast, 2 Eldritch Invocations, and 2 Pact magic spell slots, along with Light Armor Proficiency, which is relevant if you multiclass into Sorcerer. Level 3 is also not bad since you gain your Pact boon on top of those things and your spell slots upgrade to level 2. Pact of the Blade users will likely want to wait until after Warlock level 5 in order to gain extra attacks. If you're playing a melee Warlock, 5 is a good level to make the jump. In my opinion, however, it makes far more sense to take many levels of Warlock and dip into another class than the other way around. Warlocks are a very unique class and they benefit greatly from higher levels of Warlock, which makes their spell slots stronger. I like 2 levels of Paladin and then 10 levels of Warlock because you gain armor proficiency, you gain Divine Smite, and you can use Divine Smite to great effect with these spell slots. 3 levels of Warlock and 9 levels of Sorcerer will get you a ton of spells, 2 Pact Magic spell slots, your Pact Boon, and access to Eldritch Blast, and 2 Invocations which you can use to buff Eldritch Blast. He will also give you access to Meta Magic and Quicken Spell. 9 levels of Warlock and 3 levels of Bard allow you to pick up Bardic Inspiration, Medium Armor, and Shield Proficiency if you go College of Valor, as well as some skills and Song of Rest, which provides you with another short rest between long rests, which will replenish your Pact Magic spell slots. Warlocks reach their maximum spell slot level 5 at level 9, so it's not a bad idea to take 9 levels of Warlock when multiclassing with the Martial class. 11 is also a good breakpoint since you gain 1 more spell slot and Mystic Arcanum at this level, so you should aim for one of these 2 if possible. Multiclassing with 3 levels of Fighter, you would gain an Armor and Shield Proficiency along with a Fighting Style and some Combat Maneuvers if you chose Battlemaster. You would also pick up Action Surge, which also replenishes with Short Rest, which is great. 1 level is also an alternative since you'll still gain the Proficiencies and Fighting Style, but gain another spell slot and Mystic Arcanum. Assassin is also not a bad choice either when paired with the Great Old One, since the guaranteed critical hits of the Assassin can frighten groups of enemies at the very beginning of combat. And remember, your Eldritch Blast can hit 3 different enemies at character level 10, which could be a lot of frightening. So that wraps up our Warlock class video. I hope you guys learned something and you have a better understanding of what makes the Warlock subclasses different. Stay tuned for more class build and general guides for Baldur's Gate 3, and if you have further questions or you have tips for other players, leave them in the comments below.